Nobody believed in him. Not his neighbors. Not his old friends. Not even the people who shared his table at dinner. He was 34 years old, working a job that paid just enough to survive, living in a rented house with a leaking roof. And every single night, after the world went quiet, he would sit at a small wooden desk in the corner of his room, and he would work. Nobody knew what he was doing. Nobody asked. And honestly, he preferred it that way. This is the story of Daniel Cole, and the long, silent road to everything they said was impossible. Daniel had grown up in a small town in rural Ohio. His father was a carpenter. His grandfather was a carpenter. And somewhere along the way, everyone just assumed Daniel would be one too. And for a long time, he was. He built furniture, repaired things, did what he was told. And every week, he handed over his small paycheck to cover rent, food, and whatever bill had decided to arrive that month. It wasn't a bad life, but it wasn't the life he felt inside him. Daniel had a dream. Not a loud dream. Not the kind people post about. It was quieter than that. He wanted to build something of his own. A small furniture business, handcrafted pieces, made the way his grandfather once taught him. Not assembly lines. Not cheap wood. Real things. Built with real care. But every time he mentioned it, the silence in the room was heavier than any words. His friend Marcus laughed when Daniel first said it. Not a mean laugh, but the kind of laugh that carries something worse than cruelty. Pity. Dan, he said, stirring his coffee slowly, handmade furniture? You know how many guys have tried that? You know how many of them are still working regular jobs? Daniel didn't answer. He just looked out the window at the grey November street. His brother Thomas wasn't much different. You're 34, not 22. Maybe it's time to just be realistic. His mother, God bless her, would say nothing, just touch his hand gently in that way that meant she was worried. And maybe the worst part was, Daniel understood all of them. He understood their logic. He saw their numbers. He knew the odds. But something in him couldn't let it go. So he made a decision that night that changed everything. Quietly, without telling a single soul. He stopped talking about it. He stopped sharing it. Stopped mentioning it. Stopped waiting for someone to believe in him. Instead, every night, after his shift ended, after the dishes were washed and the house was quiet, he would go to the small shed behind his house and he would build. Not for applause. Not for approval. Just because something deep inside him had decided, this is what I'm going to do. He started with simple things. A side table. A small bookshelf. A wooden chair with a slightly curved back that took him 3 weeks to get right. Some nights he got it wrong. He ruined a whole piece of oak at 2 in the morning and just sat there on the floor of the shed, tired and frustrated, staring at the ceiling. But he always came back. Months passed. Then a year. Then another. And still, no one knew what was quietly growing in that small wooden shed. It was a Saturday morning when Daniel decided to bring a few pieces to the local farmer's market. No booth. No banner. Just a folding table and 3 chairs he'd made over the past 2 months. He almost didn't go. An old man stopped in front of the small table, ran his fingers slowly along the grain of the wood, turned the chair over, examined the joints. His name was Robert. He was in his 70s. Retired cabinet maker. And he looked at Daniel with the kind of eyes that had seen 1,000 things built, good and bad. You do this yourself? He asked. Daniel nodded. Robert was quiet for a moment. Then he said something Daniel would never forget. Son, I've been doing this for 50 years. And the men who do the best work are always the ones nobody hears from until it's done. Daniel didn't fully understand it then. But years later, he would. Robert bought the table and 2 of the chairs. And then, without being asked, he told 3 people about Daniel. Just 3. 2 of them reached out. One was a woman who wanted a dining table for her newly renovated home. The other was a small cafe owner who needed 4 matching stools. Daniel built everything in the evenings. Still silent. Still alone. Still before sunrise on weekends. Coffee cooling on the workbench while he sanded and measured and adjusted. And then something quiet began to happen. The cafe owner told a restaurant. The woman told her sister. Her sister told a colleague. And slowly, without noise, without advertising, without a single shouted announcement, Daniel's name began to travel through the town in whispers. That's how good work moves. Not like a wave crashing. Like water, seeping through everything, quietly, unstoppably. But the real moment, the one that broke him open, hadn't come yet. In the third year, he applied for a small business grant. A local program that helped craftsmen. He filled out every form. He photographed his work. He wrote a simple letter, honest, without any drama, about what he was trying to do. They turned him down. He read the letter twice, folded it, placed it on the desk. Then he sat in the shed for a long time, the rain hitting the roof, just listening. He thought about Marcus. He thought about Thomas. He thought about every voice that had said, "Be realistic." He thought about all the nights he had given up his evenings, his weekends, his sleep, for something that still had not fully arrived. He was tired, really tired. But then he looked around the shed, at the finished pieces stacked against the wall, at the tools his grandfather had left him, at the small handwritten list of customers he'd served that year, 12 names, all satisfied, all returning. And he thought, the grant could have helped. But it was never the reason I started. He picked up his tool, and he went back to work. By the 5th year, he had left his job. Not dramatically, not with a speech. He simply handed in his notice on a Tuesday morning and came home and stood in his workshop for a long time, breathing it in. He had 32 steady clients. A small team, just 2 people he trained himself. A proper workshop in a rented space on the edge of town, with high ceilings and good light in the mornings. His pieces were in 3 restaurants, a hotel lobby, and the homes of people who cared about things being made with intention. He never ran a single advertisement. He never made a video about his journey. He never announced anything. The work spoke, and people listened. One afternoon, Marcus came into the workshop. He stood for a long time looking at the finished pieces, a long oak dining table, a set of walnut shelves, a rocking chair that had taken 4 weeks. He didn't say much, just nodded slowly, the way men do when there's nothing left to argue. And Daniel understood then that some things are better built than explained. He thinks about that sometimes, on evenings like this one. The years of quiet work, the nights nobody saw, the doubt that sat on his shoulder every single morning and then, slowly, learned to leave him alone. He didn't win because he was the loudest. He didn't succeed because he convinced everyone he was right. He won because he kept going when no one was watching. The sawdust settles. The evening light fades through the high windows, and Daniel runs his hand slowly along the grain of a new piece, unhurried, careful, present. There is a certain kind of life that doesn't need applause. A life where the doing is enough. Where the work itself becomes the reward. Where patience is not a weakness you endure, but a strength you quietly build, one day at a time. He never needed them to believe in him. He just needed to believe in himself, long enough to show them. The quietest people are often building the loudest futures. Work in silence. Let the life you create do the talking.